Hi, I'm Diana Giselle Yanez, host of Highly Sensitive Money. I'm a money coach, certified financial planner, and a highly sensitive person who brings money and social justice together. If you're someone who feels deeply, can endlessly think through how one decision affects everything else, or has ever struggled with all the things that traditional financial thinking leaves out, you're in the right place. In this show, I chat with highly sensitive people on how they handle their money and with money experts on how they cultivate social justice in their work. Questions? Please go to allthecolors.net and schedule a free 30-minute call, and I'm happy to share resources on investment management, money coaching workshops, or anything else money and social justice related. This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute investment, legal, or tax advice. Listening does not create an advisory relationship, and nothing discussed should be considered a recommendation to buy or sell any security or adopt any investment strategies. In this podcast, we explore ideas. We do not prescribe financial decisions. The views expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host, the advisory firm, or its affiliates. Join us in this episode as we explore money and sensitivity while honoring that all of our well-being is interconnected. In this episode, I'm joined by Lynn Festa, an occupational therapist and coach on burnout and sensory processing sensitivity. We talk about what it means to move through the world noticing more, feeling more, and often caring more than the people around us realize. Lynn shares how growing up with financial scarcity, experiencing financial abuse, and later building her own successful practice shaped the way she understands money, resilience, and self-trust. We talk about how highly sensitive people often know before we know, and why learning to trust that awareness can change the way we approach work, relationships, and financial decisions. We also discuss strengths-based burnout prevention, the importance of boundaries and environmental fit, and how accessible pricing, philanthropy, and social justice can come from integrity rather than self-sacrifice. This conversation is a grounded reminder that flourishing does not require us to push harder. It asks us to listen to ourselves more closely. Welcome, Lynn Festa, to Highly Sensitive Money. It's exciting to have you here. For listeners, Lynn and I connected through Martha Beck's Wayfinder Life Coach Training Program. Lynn focuses on high sensitivity, and her background is really varied. And we had a conversation a few months ago that has me really excited to have you on as a guest. Welcome, Lynn.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
And to start off, could you please introduce your work and how you came to focus on the highly sensitive?
Oh, yes, absolutely. By degree, I'm an occupational therapist, graduated in 1988, just a few years ago, hint wink. And through the lens of an occupational therapist too, I've always been, at the risk of a bad pun, sensitive to sensitivities. And I actually, like most people, stumbled across the work of Elaine Aron. Probably in the early 2000s, so shortly after her book came out in 1997. And I remember, I'm going to back up just a little bit. So I would work with people, patients, love working with my patients in the clinic and just love working with them. And I would joke and I said, "Oh, I'm shy." And they're like, "No, you are the last person that's shy." And I was like, okay, I got to figure this out. And then introvert came in. And then I was like, yeah, I'm quiet. But that didn't sit with me either. And then, like I said, I stumbled on Dr. Aron's work, and I just remember thinking, oh my God, aha, that's me. And it felt so reassuring, especially since Dr. Aron is very specific about saying it's a trait, it's not a disorder. And through the lens of an occupational therapist, too, we focus on our clients, and we change either things within the client, or we change the environment. So a lot of working with highly sensitive people is about adapting to our environment, because actually one of the other names to being highly sensitive is environmental sensitivity. So I love when all the pieces come together. And then I was lucky enough, and I think it was 2000, 19. Dr. Aaron and came to Kripalu here in Western Massachusetts to do a whole weekend on the highly sensitive person. So I made sure I cleared my schedule and went down and did that because it was one of the last times that Dr. Aaron was going to come all the way to the East Coast here in the States. And boy, it would just, everything just fell together. And just being amongst my people and really understanding it. And that's when I realized I can continue to work on my niche, which had been really working with people in burnout. I know this is a long explanation, but I'll close the loop in a second. I was working with people.
I love the context.
Yeah,
thank you.
But I was working with people who were burnt out because I was in healthcare, and that was a huge thing. And I'm really proud to say I started banging that drum in the mid-teens, saying we have to talk about burnout. COVID did that for me. Too, it amplified it. But I was doing that before, and I was also wondering why some of us would be more prone to burnout than other people if we're all in, like I talked about, in that same environment. So then I realized that my niche of my niche got to be working with people who are highly sensitive, who are experiencing burnout. So that's where it all came together and where I get to spend a lot of my space working with that too. So that's where I am.
Yeah. And thank you for that overview of that funnel, right? Of like you started off in occupational therapy and then it just kept narrowing as you realized who you were best suited to work with.
Yes. Yeah. Because a lot of with being highly sensitive is understanding it. And really, truly understanding, again, like I'm going to keep saying, it's a trait, not a disorder. And understanding that it's 30% of the population, but we have to work according to the world that's built for the 70%. So how do we do that and maintain our meaning and purpose, again, which is the lens of occupational therapy too, so.
And you mentioned that another way that people describe high sensitivity is environmental sensitivity. For myself, when I first came across this term, I actually had a hard time relating to it because of two things. I'm a high sensation seeking, highly sensitive person, which means I'm always looking for innovation. I'm always looking for very strong stimulus, which by my standards is probably, by other people's standards, my high stimulation is probably lower than theirs, but for a sensitive person.
It's yours.
One of the things that I found, though, is that I have a lot of more my internal environment sometimes is what I feel like I'm most sensitive to. And that was confusing because sometimes the high sensitivity focus is very much on it's too bright, it's too cold, it's too hot. But for me, it was like my internal environment. I'm still learning how to manage how much it dictates and how overpowering it can be. But anyway, that's what came up for me when you mentioned that term environment.
Yeah, and then the other term that I appreciate because it's what's being used in research and what I also appreciate with my background in occupational therapy, the sciences, I want the evidence behind things. So what's happening too, and on a very exciting level, is a whole lot more research is being done, not just here in the United States, but all over the world. And that's called sensory processing sensitivity, which I also think really is a lovely way to just really kind of nail it down too. Without being, sometimes people can respond to being highly sensitive as you're too sensitive and then something's off. But sensory processing sensitivity, like the processing and what you just said, like what's going on inside, I think really speaks to it a little bit more clean.
Yes. And I think when it comes to the topic of money for myself as a money coach and working with, I attract a lot of other highly sensitives who also, when they start to process the money topics, whether it be debt, whether it be asking for a raise, whether it be learning how to merge finances with a partner, the processing that's needed for those kind of things is often heightened for highly sensitive people.
Absolutely.
And I often find that it takes another highly sensitive person to actually be able to do that depth of processing.
Yes. I always say we're like the Pringles of potato chips. We're like so highly processed. We're still a potato chip, but We're just
I love that. And it's so nestled, right? Like
right?
thousands
So
and thousands
just the way
of
we love
layers.
it. We want it just in a tube. Don't eat them. They're poison, of course. But so maybe I can't use that analogy anymore. But I always love that overthinking, that processing. And that I've ever talked about the does with other people, the acronym that explains. So, yeah,
and I often bring that up. And
good.
what's happened for that maybe listeners can remember is that I've had several guests that when I explain to them that the DOES acronym, the processing, overwhelm, emotional depth, and sensorial sensitivities, I've had several guests say, "Oh, I am highly sensitive. Like all of that applies to me." Yes.
Yeah,
That's been a fun experience. Shifting over to one of the main focus of this podcast is money, right? And I'd love to hear about the financial background of your childhood, whatever it is you're comfortable sharing, and how that may have affected your work as a physical therapist, as someone who's now also an entrepreneur, who became an entrepreneur over time. I'd love to hear any context that you might want to share on that end.
Sure. And because and I'm happy to share my journey. And what I love about my journey is that I'm not going to say it was easy, but I love that where I'm at now is I've had to go through that to get to this point. I grew up one of 6 children, and what would described as the educated poor. And I was, to go back to being highly sensitive, we talk about taste, smells, sights, and all of those things too. I grew up on powdered milk. And so I describe it as the taste of poverty for me, like the taste of my financial situation growing up. I could taste it. So I can name that. So it's powdered milk to me. Because there was too many of us, and milk was very expensive for the situation we were in. But my grandmother, God bless her, lived around the corner and made sure we were all reading by the time we were 5. And very as good as you can be at math and counting by the time you were 5. So it was we blessed that it was the educated poor. But there wasn't. The joke now was that my mom tried to rub 2 nickels together to make a dime. So I grew up with that. There was food on the table and a roof over our heads. So we were way ahead of, very blessed that it was just powdered milk. And when I make the joke now too, it's like you can tell who came from a big family. I was at a gathering and the pizza came in, and I was starting to throw elbows to be like, "Hey, if you want food, you grab it." And I'm like, and I made the joke, like, you can tell who else was from a big family that you knew when the pizza came in to get your slice, or it would be gone. So that was my background. So then when it became to go to college, higher education, I wanted to do that. But I had to pay for it. So, because there was just no money. So I actually was trying to figure out whether to be an occupational therapist or a physical therapist. And the occupational therapy school gave me, because it was a private school, gave me a significant amount of financial aid, Pell Grants, all of those things. And I will go a shout out to people listening in the States. My Pell Grants were at 9%. Just to give you a perspective, it was the mid 80s. Loans were everything was very expensive. And the physical therapy school gave me barely enough money for my books. So I said, okay, I guess I'm going to go be an OT, which again, if you let the universe unfold, it unfolds the way it's supposed to. Follow the path, what's put in front of you. So I'm very proud. I went to Boston University, Sargent College. If there's other Sargent grads out here, it's go us. And that's where it became. But college was actually stressful. I don't look back. The reason I never went back and have more my master's or my doctorates or anything was because school was so stressful for me, because I was on all of these grants, I was on work study, and I was on a program that shortly after I graduated went to 5 years instead of 4. So we were taking 18 to 20 credits every semester. I was working. And sometimes it was actually very difficult. I started making bread in college, so I could have bread and cheese for dinner. And so that's been my background. I will actually add two. So I go to start practicing as an occupational therapist. It's not a place it's not a field you go into because you love it and you can mostly pay your bills. But when I started working, it was 6 days a week because the weekends were time and a half to work a 6th day. You just did it. And then the part that I want to add too, which I think was interesting too, was so then I was in a relationship, I was in a marriage, that I want to bring this up because this is about money and being highly sensitive, was that marriage ended for other reasons, but one of the big reasons that it ended was because of financial abuse.
Wow.
The amount of financial strain that he put me in was awful. And the part when I got the bravery, to anybody who's left on marriage, it's not an easy thing to do, is I quickly always thought the story was that I didn't know money and I didn't understand money, right? Because I never had money. So I think that's something, a story that I wish I hadn't told myself.
And it's for when I've worked with people coming out of divorce, or even if it's not a marriage itself, but like splitting a long partnership,
Okay.
I often hear this from a lot of people, especially people who grew up gendered as female, right? Know about money. So it's very much like a cultural context that can be hard to question it.
Yeah.
So it's a common experience. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, no, because I think it's part of our journey, right? And we share our story. We help somebody else in that story too. And again, I think going to Boston University, great university, I love it, but it's very much the haves and the have-nots. So it's a very affluent community. It's very diverse. It's awesome, but it's very affluent. Versus then there's people who, like me, who are there on work study. And that's the only way we get through it. So again, I wonder now, putting this together, we tell our brains we don't know money because we never had it. But the nice part is that's about the time I actually started my own practice I spent 30 years specializing in hand therapy. And I opened my own practice and always thinking I couldn't do it because I don't know money and I don't know business. I'm really proud. A good friend of mine said, because I realized now my credit score was so bad from my now ex-husband that I couldn't get loans to start my practice. So my friend said, do it the way Spike Lee did. And I'm like, what did Spike Lee do? And Spike Lee took out credit cards because nobody would trust that he could make films, right? So I was like, okay. It was a perfect way to rebuild my credit under my name. And within 6 months, I had started to make a profit in a business that most people don't.
That's amazing.
So I think that was another good money story, to trust ourselves. And I realize now also, as a highly sensitive person, we know before we know. And we have this intuition. And that's part of the S of the does, is like sensing the subtle and just knowing. We have that sense, that emotional contagion of like, we know something's up. We definitely know when something's wrong. We question it because we don't understand our sensitivity, right? But the more we understand our sensitivity, we start to say, wait a minute, actually, this is what's going on. So I really think that owning all of that and putting that together, and then knowing that you can turn things around. And then the accountant looking at me and saying, Lynn, nobody ever makes a profit in this kind of business. And I did it, like I said, within 6 months. Paid off the credit cards and was starting to make a living.
And I wonder if also your ability to live on powdered milk and to make your own bread meant that income was lower. So you lived on what was there, right? So this flexibility probably really helped make a profit so quickly.
Thank you for that. It's funny how reflecting on that, like knowing hard work. And I think going back to, as a highly sensitive person, and when we're in our right zone, and that's where is working with highly sensitive people, when we can trust ourselves and know our intuition. And as my friend who told me the Spike Lee story, she's a dear friend, she also said, she joked, she's, Lynn, listen to the voices in your head. What are they telling you? They're telling me like, no, I know how to do this. I can do this. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That understanding of knowing hard work, knowing how to live in a budget because there isn't a backup. So.
Yeah, and that phrase, we know before we know. I tell this joke of being on a date with someone, and I don't know what it was that he said, but I picked it up and I was like, oh, is it this? And he's, are you a psychic? And I'm like, and I just started laughing because it was like, no, I'm just more in tune with emotions than you are. It just looks so obvious. And it sometimes has been a conflict for myself when I'm with the other 70% of the world that I'm like, what do you mean you don't see this?
Can't you see this right in front of you?
It's so plain.
What's the matter, you people?
It's like, I'm sure bees must feel like that, right? That they can see ultraviolet light and like you can't see all of this light. It's just, anyway, but that we know before we know. And it can be so easy to forget that the 70% of the world doesn't know that. Right. And it can become like internalized gaslighting that I've done to myself of like, oh, I don't really know. I can't be sure. And you're reminding us how important it is to trust those instincts. Mm-hmm. And again, we have a background in occupational therapy, which is very like in the physical, right? Especially in our hands, something we use all the time. But you and I connected through a life coaching program. And when we were having our first conversation, you shared that one of your favorite topics is positive psychology and a strength-based approach. And I was just speaking to some of the hardships of being a highly sensitive, like seeing things that others don't see. I'd love to hear how you bring in that positive psychology and the strengths-based approach to maybe that kind of self-doubt that maybe you had to deal with when you were first an entrepreneur.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So in my journey, and I want to say it started with the life coaching program that we found each other through. And then I just wanted more and more and more. And I think as a highly sensitive person too, I want everything to really make sense in my brain to then move forward. So I found one of the next programs I did was the science of positive psychology. Again, I love the coaching parts of things and I love all the tools. But for me, my brain works when I understand the science behind it. So I was very drawn to positive psychology. And one of the main components of positive psychology is using a strength-based approach. And one of the things that works beautifully, and I actually work a lot with the groups that I work with, and my private clients are using our strengths, because also our strengths can also correlate really strongly with what we actually value too. So there's something called the VIA survey, and it's VIA character survey. It's free, it's online. And what it does, and it's been done in 40 different languages, millions of people have taken it. So it's very reliable and very valid at this point. And it's free because it gives you a snapshot of your 5 signature strengths. There's a total of 24, but your top 5. And what that does is it really creates what Barbara Fredrickson calls the upward spiral. And not being happy clappy. I want to make that clear whenever I talk about this. It's just put on a happy face. That's not this. But this is focusing on what you focus on expands. And especially as highly sensitive people, we're pretty highly focused. So, right? We're sensing that subtle. We're overthinking. It doesn't take a lot of stimulation to get us going. We're emotionally reactive. All of those things that make us highly sensitive.
Oh my God, you're describing me to a T.
Oh, yay, right? See how the science fits together. Yeah. So you get 5. So you take this survey. I always tell people, don't overthink it, especially if you're highly sensitive. We love, what does that really mean? So almost take it as fast as you can. And it stays pretty steady. And I know that having done it over the years for laughs and giggles, I'll take it every couple of years and they'll come out and you get something called 5 signature strengths. Mine is honesty. Again, highly sensitive. I'm in my value system. Humor. I love to use humor. Thank goodness, kindness, right? Curiosity and gratitude. So what you do with those, again, is if you're focusing on your strengths, that's who you are. That's how you're wired. And most people, You never say always or never. But I would say 99% of the people, I say, so what'd you think when you took it? You got your 5 character strengths and they're yours. There's no right or wrong answer to them. And people are like, oh yeah, okay. So what you can go through and ask yourself, okay, what's my number one strength? Honesty. What happens when I'm not being honest with myself, really, or with a situation, or how I'm approaching a situation? Well, things get off and I feel off and it starts to go down the wrong path versus if you take a step back, okay, no, let's be really honest about this. And that's where you can start to focus on it. When things start to go sideways for me, too, doubling down on gratitude. A ton of science behind gratitude anyway. But that's something that I can really tap into to create that upward spiral. Maybe on a day where things are, like, again, are not going as well as I'd like. And I always talk about, though, with gratitude, too, it's important not to say, well, at least something. Okay, today, what we talked about right before we got on, like gratitude, something I'm totally out of my control, the weather, right? And where I was, the bad weather was just circling around us for hours. And I thought, oh dear. But now, again, giving a moment of gratitude that this technology works. And we're able to do this. So those are ways that using a strength-based approach can really turn things around. Again, working on what's working versus what's not working. And then that's where I love, too, the science behind focusing on what's working, using your strengths. It's what's going to move the needle forward.
Yeah. And again, I know another one of the many things that you focus on is burnout prevention. And I'm hearing you say focus on what works, right? Focus on what's the upward spiral. For highly sensitives, I know that because we're taking in so much information, sometimes we're closer to burnout than non-highly sensitives.
That's very strong
What
in the
are some of
literature. Very strong in the literature that we will burn out.
How do you help with burnout prevention? Is it through positive psychology? Is it through using these values? What are some of the things that you do in that area or that you recommend?
Yeah. So again, finding our own special sauce, finding different things that works. So somebody will come to me what I think is interesting is people don't realize they're highly sensitive until we start talking about it. Because a lot of times people will come and say, secretly too, as much as there's been a lot more talk about burnout and they're trying to do programs and some are working, some aren't working, you still think it's you. And actually it is. There is a balance of what I call extrinsic reasons, like the workload is too high, you don't have the skills, you're in an environment that's not suited to somebody who's highly sensitive, versus intrinsic, like being a perfectionist. We, as highly sensitive people, we really, the line that I love is do it once and do it right. And move on. And don't waste my time, right? Again, like you said earlier, you're like, why isn't everybody seeing this? We're one step ahead. We're the canary in the coal mine. And it's frustrating too, because if we're not extroverted, I actually identify as an introvert, but maybe a little bit a high sensation seeker too, that we don't always have the energy to see what's working. But we're the ones who are going to do that. We're the ones that are going to do the extra stuff. But we're the ones taking it all in. When everybody else seems fine with a situation, we may leave at the end of the day a whole lot more drained from the situation. Because we also push ourselves way too hard. Because we also, for different reasons, everybody's different. Some of us, I like it done right. If I'm going to do something, I'm going to be really good at it and really know it. But sometimes there isn't a lot of grace that happens with that. And I think that's where I work on with people who are highly sensitive, like a lot of self-compassion. And knowing that what we think of as our 100%, I'm going to be blunt and I respectfully don't care but our 100% is a lot of times not everybody else's 100%. And I'm not saying bring it down because I don't want people to change, but we need to understand our energy buckets. So a lot of times I'll work with somebody about, okay, their reaction to a situation. Or are they in a situation that is just so poorly suited for them? I could practically have it on my intake sheet. I never tell somebody to quit their job, but it's amazing how many people are like, wow, that was the wrong job for me. When they understand that's putting a square peg in a round hole. So I think that's where it comes back to that strength, like being really honest with yourself about what's working and what's working, or you know what's not working. And maybe this is not the situation for you, and no amount of trying to bend yourself into that situation will it work. Which is then what, again, if I look back at my 35 years as an occupational therapist, the times where I was like knocking it out of the park and the most happy, and then therefore getting really good outcomes with the people I worked with, because it was the energy I brought into the room, was when I was working and I had control over my environment. There wasn't loud music playing. There was classical music playing. There was pretty things on the walls, not cluttered with words. Again, that back to that visual. So really taking a sense in of your environment and how it's working too. And then more internally, which is a lot of us, is what are we taking on too much of? And boundaries. Thank goodness. There's a lot more out there about understanding boundaries too. You won't lose your job if you're like the one time you need to leave on time, taking your vacation time. All those are the kind of patterns that have come up consistently in my work.
Okay, those are beautiful. And I feel like I could ask you a million questions about each of those things. So I'll definitely include any resources that you want to share on this. I'll include your website because I imagine listeners have more questions too. And I feel like, Lynn, you have so much depth of knowledge that these topics that I want to talk about, we're just grazing them. Yeah. And if we're going to graze another topic, I want us to switch now to speaking about social justice. And especially boundaries and social justice. For example, for myself, as a person of color, I often feel like I'm not doing enough. Right? And maybe it's not because I'm a person of color. Maybe it's just because I'm highly empathetic and the news overwhelms me. And I'm just like, how dare I feel comfortable with my food and shelter when there's so many people who don't? I live in Mexico City, and this can sound maybe very contradictory, but one of the reasons that I love living here is because poverty isn't hidden. I had this experience when I lived in Southern California where anyone who was houseless was actually shipped out of the city that I lived in. And I saw someone that was houseless maybe after 2 years of living there. And I was so shocked that I was disgusted with myself for being shocked. It's like I had forgotten that there were so many people who weren't living in the comfort that I had. And here in Mexico City, it's something that happens day in, day out, which feels like it keeps me motivated in my own activism. And it keeps me, I don't know, in touch with the fact that there is pain in the world. I don't want to forget that the way that I did before. I don't want to deny it. And it motivates me to keep working. But I also have to remember when I first worked out, I was a social worker right out of college. I wanted to have everyone live with me. Yeah. Right?
No,
like I couldn't tolerate their discomfort. Yes. I know. And I think I was just so young. I didn't have the tools. But learning how to set those emotional boundaries of this problem is not something within my power to control has taken so much work. I'd love to hear some of your own social justice journey. And I want you to invite us into like how it is that you started your foundation work also.
Yeah. Oh God, that's so beautiful. And I think a lot of it has to do with being highly sensitive, is without even realizing too, again, the science behind emotional contagion is you will pick up on the subconscious energy of the room. It sounds woo-woo, but it's truly a thing. There is science behind that. And I always say people who are highly sensitive, 30%, that's on high. So we're going to feel and see everything. So that was tough. Coming, again, as I spoke, coming from a background of knowing what it's like, not knowing where your next meal has come from. Like I said, in college, especially. And so my social justice, I'm getting a little quiet because it's very important to me. I'm processing deeply right now that question. And so I remarried and have been happily remarried for 20 years. And
congratulations.
Thank you. And he comes from a background of working incredibly hard. He's now a retired physician, working incredibly hard. I thought I worked hard as an OT, try hanging out with a physician, and it's pretty nonstop all the time. And we worked hard, and we both lived way below our means because that's who we are and what we do. And so then it came to a point in our lives where we had an abundance. And I think as a highly sensitive person and being empathic and understanding how grateful, going back to one of my strengths, how grateful I am to have the life that I feel incredibly privileged to live. And how so I know I'm with the right person now is I wanted to start foundations, charitable foundations. And that has been on all the days when things are getting you down and all of that stuff. That's one thing that actually will definitely turn me around, and knowing that giving back has been incredibly important, because social justice is, especially, again, we're in Massachusetts and the States, it's pretty ugly what's happening here. And it breaks my heart. And going back to what you said too is, am I doing enough? Can I do more? And always feel like you're not. And no matter what, I've worked with people who know people. Maybe one of my mentors is people who build whole buildings and things like that. Everybody's looking to do more. And I guess doing our part with social justice is incredibly important. One of the projects that I like to work with a little bit, one of my side things that I love to do is open water swimming and teaching people open water swimming. So one of the projects here that through the local YMCA is because we also had a local 2 summers ago now, there was a drowning of a teenager that didn't need to happen. So it's giving swimming lessons and making sure that kids in their teenage years who didn't have the privilege of swim lessons, right? It should be a right. Not like every kid in America, or every kid in the world, I should say, should know how to be safe around the water. So taking that, and I'm blessed that I can do the time, talent, treasure of teaching that, because I actually happen to be a swim coach. So that's where that has been really fulfilling.
I love that example, because one of the ways that I think about how I limit my overwhelm when it comes to social justice is to say the problems are huge. And there's 8 billion of us on the planet, right?
Yeah.
And all of us are empowered enough, have the capacity to work on an aspect of the problem that most calls to our time, treasures, skills,
right,
and talents. Like, that makes a difference.
Yeah. So that's where and everybody's social justice will look different, as it should. Everybody's philanthropic endeavors should be different, because there's so much out there. But if you put your strengths, going back, like I said, complete the loop here, is you go back to your strengths, and you go back and be in integrity, and you're listening to the voices in your head. That actually fulfills you as a person. And that brings back to self-care as a person, which actually brings it back to is one of the main ingredients to help minimize burnout, regardless of whatever your field is. And that's filling your bucket. And that is, at the end of the day, is, to me, makes it all worthwhile, finding our spot in the world.
Yeah. It feels like you're saying it's maybe this Mobius strip. You know how a Mobius strip is, it's like an infinity sign that has the outside and the inside, and the outside becomes the inside becomes the outside.
Oh, yeah.
If you're taking care of yourself, it's easier to take care of others. And if you're taking care of others, it's easier to have self-compassion. And as highly sensitives, at least for myself, I believe that because of my high sensitivity, I'm more able to show up in both.
Yeah, see?
Like, I can see what the problems are for both ends, both for others and for myself. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if that.
I mean, it's what you're doing, which is why what you're doing is working, is you took your strength as a social worker. You took your strength as a highly sensitive person, and you're taking this incredible knowledge that you have with money, which especially is really stressful for women. And one of the things, too, that was so easy for me, and I wanted secretly, here's the confession, is I wanted to keep it easy. I wanted to bury my head in the sand. And I was really proud of myself that I said, you know what, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to understand this. Which is, if you sit down with the right person, they'll teach it to you in a way that's understandable. And they'll work with you.
Yes.
Like what you do with your clients. So you can work with them within their integrity, with their goals, their strengths. If you were like me and it was really easy to I was tired. I wanted to sit back and be like, yeah. I'm like, I don't have to deal. Woohoo. I'm like, that's not a thing.
It's not actually an integrity because you're avoiding a key aspect of your life as an adult.
Right. And I was handing over locus of control. And actually here, I did that in my first marriage and it ended badly. So this time taking that and saying, I'm going to understand this. And then also, if I'm going to be in it with somebody else, understand that we're on the same page too. Mm-hmm. Again, going back, and if you know you're in flow, and that's another big topic, that's a whole nother podcast of flow, and you'll feel it in your body. And as highly sensitive people, what I love about being highly sensitive is it's also super obvious. We're so sensitive that we know if it's working or not, right? And we don't
definitely
suffer fools.
The princess and the pea.
Right? Yeah, we don't suffer fools. So if you're highly sensitive and you're listening to this and you're feel like you're putting up with something you shouldn't, here is permission to let it go and move on. So.
One of the last things that I want to talk about that, again, you mentioned in our first conversation was the importance of reasonable fees. I remember you brought this up, and as part of your social justice work and an entrepreneur who's a coach, who's a specialist, who needs to take care of your own needs. Yeah. Tell us what reasonable fees are and how you came to that.
Yeah. And boy, I love that question because of my background, because I am, as an occupational therapist too, I'm all about accessibility too. So I have, how do I say this? I had the luxury, it felt right to me. Again, going back, checking in with your body, what felt right to you. When you first started out as a coach, it's low. I've been doing it for a while. It started out at $40. And then asking for money too was not an easy thing to do. But as it's evolved for me, because the people that I work with, especially in healthcare, I know what we're making. I know what we're not making. But I know how badly it needs to, if somebody comes for services. Because I never want somebody not to get coached because they can't afford it. That breaks my very highly sensitive heart. So I do a balance of making sure that it feels right to me, but it's still accessible to people on whatever level it can be. So no, I'm at the point now where I average out about $70 for a 50-minute session. And that feels right to me. And also because I can too. And that is part of my give back too. So that's the situation that I'm in. And again, sometimes when you talk about grow up so without, and you're scrambling and you're hustling and you're doing all of those things, I think I'm extra sensitive to that too. So accessibility, and then part of the social justice too is making sure equitable services to people too. So yes, I may be one of those underchargers, and I'm okay with that. And I think that's the answer with that too.
Well, but I would encourage you to question that, because undercharging often means that you're undercharging, that someone is undercharging at their own expense.
Oh, touche.
Right?
Yeah.
And because I do that too. For myself, I have a sliding scale where some of my work as an investment manager is is paid very differently than my work as a money coach or someone who provides education to nonprofits.
Got it. Yeah.
It's very much based on how the person is able to pay. But at the end of the day, I know that my well-being is provided for my investment management work.
Okay.
Right? So, yeah, I just, undercharging has a different connotation where you're actually putting yourself in peril. And I don't know that you are.
Yeah. So maybe I shouldn't, see, this is good. I'm not undercharging because if I listen to what I said, if I'm honest with myself, using my strength, right? I'm like, no, it felt right. It felt right to me. Yeah. Again, when I'm working with other OTs or a lot of, you always think, who's going to track? At one point, too, I had an abnormal number of school teachers who are just starting out. I know what it's like to have student loans, but be in a situation you're like, I need backup, too. So I guess I appreciate that I'm charging fees that are accessible to people, too. So.
And that is very much a part of social justice, because when I think about reasonable fees, for me, it's as someone who's able to do it also, and who it's very important for me to be accessible, for me to be able to work with people across the wealth spectrum. But I do it from a place of my own inner abundance, my own inner stability, my own inner financial stability.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I'm hearing you say. Maybe the term undercharging doesn't really fit, but it's more about accessibility and reasonable, and also people that you enjoy working with.
Oh, I screen everybody. I do have a challenging client, and she keeps coming back, and I'm just like, the universe is sending her to me just to challenge me, because the rest of them are so much fun. I'm ready to write them a check. That's how much fun I have coaching. And I pissed somebody off once when they said, because I love public speaking. I'm trying to get paid to public speak because I love it. And I started to do before COVID, and then the rest is history. And that's where I'm not going to undercharge. But so I said I could do that, and I would do workshops, and I'd do private, and I'd do this. And they said, what's your favorite? And I said, honestly, it's what I'm doing in the moment. And he actually got mad at me. I was like, don't get mad at me. It's truly, oh my God. So I'll come off this and be like, oh yeah, podcasts are my favorite today. So it's like whatever, that's where I get to do that. And the other important thing that somebody said to me when we were starting to do some workshops, and he's a social worker, and we were doing some group work, and it fell apart because he moved away and COVID and everything. But I said, what do we charge? He goes, what do you get paid when you're an OT? And I told him, I'm like, if I'm lucky, because of insurance, then that should be your fee. Take your fee that you would get paid doing hand therapy for that too. So that always helped me too. Yeah. There's always so many, as an entrepreneur, setting our prices and caring for ourselves. It's a whole conversation. It's one of my specialties. Right. Yeah.
So I want to thank you for your time to be here. Like I said in the middle of our conversation, you have so much wisdom around, and so much science-backed information around high sensitivity, which I love.
Oh my God.
Because it's so validating. I'm
reading the latest book that came out. It's awesome. So anyway, yes, I'm like a little too much with the science, but...
You are a scientist at the end of the day. You're a medical professional, right? And it has to be evidence-based as you move. Is there anything else that you want to share with listeners as we start to sign off?
Oh, so I've started a small YouTube channel.
Nice. Yeah,
and link it. And I'm keeping them short, and just like little lessons about being highly sensitive and things like that too. So I'm encouraging people to check out my YouTube channel.
For sure. Yeah. I'll make sure to include that. You have so much to share. Yes. I'm excited to keep staying in touch, and I'm excited for this course you're going to be teaching at the Wayfinder.
I'm having so much fun putting that together. Thank you for being there, too. I appreciate
really
the support.
To that workshop. Yeah.
There's a lot to cover, so my brain is a highly sensitive person, too. You have to focus. You have 50 minutes.
I know. There's so much to cover. Sometimes I think I'm going to need multiple lives to cover everything that I want to cover.
Right. Thank you, though. I'm glad the universe put us in each other's path. This has been a pleasure. And to me, if you help one person, then it's all worthwhile. Again, going back, doing what we can at the time we have. That's one of my sticky notes. Do what you can with what you have and the time you have and the place you are.
I love Lynn's reminder that we often know before we know. For those of us who process deeply, that awareness can feel like a burden when we are constantly questioning ourselves, absorbing what is happening around us, or trying to adapt to environments that do not fit. But sensitivity can also be information. It can help us recognize when something is out of alignment, when our energy is depleted, when a financial dynamic is unhealthy, or when we are being called to contribute in a way that reflects our values more deeply. Lynn invites us to get on an upward spiral by leaning into our strengths, listening to our inner knowing, and following our curiosity. Thank you for joining me on Highly Sensitive Money. I'm Diana, and I hope this episode helped you see how money and sensitivity can work together while honoring our interconnected well-being. We have the power to create a system where everyone's needs are met. If you found value in today's conversation, please take a moment to leave a review and share this episode with someone who could benefit. Your support helps this message reach more people navigating their own financial journey. A thank you goes to Mikey Q for the music and Juan Antonio Nunez for producing. For more resources on bringing money and social justice together, sign up for my monthly newsletter over at allthecolors.net. I also invite you to schedule a free 30-minute call where we can talk about money coaching, investment management, and all things money and social justice. Remember that all investments involve risk, and decisions should be made based on your individual circumstances, ideally in consultation with a qualified professional. Until next time, remember that your sensitivity and deep thinking is your superpower.